Qin Mu stood upon the vast and majestic moonship. His arms stretched outward as he gripped the towering pillars beside him. In that moment, he resembled a colossal being condemned by the heavens themselves, silent, rigid, and burdened, his gaze fixed upon the world unfolding before his eyes. Behind him, the shattered remains of the moon drifted quietly through the void. From time to time, blazing meteors tore through the darkness, crashing down around the moonship. Each impact ignited the endless blackness, illuminating it in violent flashes of light. And within that flickering glow, chaos reigned. The devils stirred restlessly in the shadows. They surged and scattered, their movements frantic, their voices rising into a cacophony of eerie noise, like a tide of madness barely contained. Yet ahead of the ship lay a completely different scene. There, untouched by darkness, existed a pure land, isolated, tranquil, and eerily pristine. It felt detached from the ruined world behind him, as though it belonged to another realm entirely. Silence hung over it, deep and mysterious, filled with secrets no one could yet grasp. It was almost impossible to believe that such a place could exist within the great ruins. Before Qin Mu stretched a boundless forest, lush and ancient, followed by an endless chain of mountains rising layer upon layer. But far in the distance, the land abruptly ended, as though someone had cleaved the world apart and hollowed out its center. Beyond that void, separated by a sea of clouds, stood a city suspended in midair. It was magnificent. The city rose proudly above the heavens, like the dwelling place of immortals. Golden clouds filled the sky, radiating sacred light, while towering palaces pierced through the mist, reaching toward the firmament. Above them, a continuous chain of floating peaks shimmered with golden brilliance, their summits glowing like divine treasures. Deep within the clouds, enormous statues of gods stood in solemn silence, like emperors guarding their eternal dominion. And there, high above everything, hovered a colossal piece of machinery, silent, intricate, and awe-inspiring. Countless formations were etched into its iron and gold body, forming an unimaginably complex structure. From it flowed streams of radiant energy, weaving through the air like rivers of light, linking the sky and the city into a single, harmonious system. It was a world of divinity, a forgotten paradise, but everything was already destroyed. Qin Mu froze. The carefree village before him, once a place of legend, had become nothing more than ruins. The radiant sky city was broken and hollow. The palaces that once pierced the heavens were now riddled with gaping holes. The floating mountain range had collapsed, shattered into fragments that drifted helplessly among the clouds. Even the towering god statues had fallen into ruin, their limbs missing, their forms leaning as if in silent mourning. Above, the sun itself was dying. At its center was a vast black void that had devoured more than half its body, leaving behind only a faint golden ring, like a broken halo clinging to existence. The great machinery in the sky had also been destroyed. Its fragments floated aimlessly, lifeless and silent. Only a few massive components still functioned, barely sustaining the fragile barrier that surrounded what remained of Carefree Village. Not far from the moonship, a massive stone plaque lay embedded diagonally in the forest, as if it had fallen from the heavens. The inscription upon it was broken, but two faint words could still be made out: Xiao, Pal. Even that name had been shattered. A sudden, overwhelming sorrow surged within Qin Mu's chest. It rose like a storm, uncontrollable, flooding every corner of his heart until it consumed him completely. There was no more Carefree Village. There was no place left in this world where one could be carefree. The giant figure standing upon the moonship slowly lowered his head, as though bearing the judgment of the heavens. Then, he fell to his knees. Tears slipped silently from his eyes, falling one drop at a time onto the cold, unyielding floor beneath him. The home he had longed for was gone. All the dreams he had clung to, his imagined family, the neighbors he had never met, the warmth of belonging, had been shattered in an instant, like drawings traced in sand, erased by a single gust of wind. There was no mother waiting, no stern father. Nothing remained of the world he had built in his heart. The dream was over. Reality returned. He was still just an orphan, raised among the old, the weak, the sick, and the disabled. His hometown no longer existed. From within the ship, Dushan Devil King quietly observed the kneeling figure. The giant, bathed in faint moonlight, kept his head lowered, his shoulders trembling ever so slightly. At that moment, Dushan Devil King understood. He understood that pain all too well. When his own Dushan world had been annihilated, He had felt the same despair, the same unbearable grief. He had wept without restraint, cursed the heavens, and in his rage, fought desperately against the messengers of death from Yudu, trying to save his people. Again and again, he had been struck down, his body shattered, his soul broken, until, in the end, he had no choice but to submit to fate. And now, looking at Qin Mu, he saw his own past reflected back at him. A young man on the brink, a soul about to be crushed by destiny. But Qin Mu slowly raised his head. His eyes were cold now, calm, yet radiant, like twin moons shining in the night. He closed them briefly. Darkness returned, but when he opened them again, the light was even brighter. Standing atop the moonship, his emotions surged and receded like tides. Countless thoughts collided within his mind, refusing to settle. Then, at last, he spoke. I didn't come here to find Carefree Village. I came to find Village Chief, Granny, and the others. They are my family. Disabled elderly village, that is my true home. That is my Carefree Village. With renewed clarity, Qin Mu steadied himself and began to observe his surroundings. Soon, his gaze landed upon several stone statues positioned along the edge of the barrier. God statues. Only with such statues could one safely traverse the darkness of the great ruins. Understanding dawned on him instantly. These must have been left behind by the villagers, which meant they made it here. A spark of hope flickered in his eyes. But danger still lurked. The forest ahead was filled with unseen restrictions, deadly, invisible forces that twisted through the air like silent killers. Even the moonship could not guarantee his safety. So Qin Mu did not rush forward blindly. Instead, he activated the Nine Heavens Eye awakening skill, pushing his vision to its limits. And then, he saw it. A faint flash of light. Far ahead, within the ruins. Without hesitation, Qin Mu stepped forward, activating the moonship and crossing the barrier. In that instant, the world changed. The suffocating darkness of the great ruins vanished behind him. He had entered another realm. Suddenly, laughter echoed. Countless devils burst forth from the moonship, flooding into the forest like a black tide. A terrifying devil god rose into the air, her two heads twisting as her 5 tails lashed wildly. With 8 clawed limbs, she moved through the sky with unnatural speed. Vada, she shrieked. Kill! Dushan Devil King was horrified. He hadn't even realized so many devils had been hiding aboard the ship. The devil god turned back, laughing mockingly at Qin Mu. We've searched for this place for so long, and you've led us straight to it. But Qin Mu remained silent, watching, waiting. Then, a ripple passed through the forest. In an instant, tens of thousands of devils melted. Flesh vanished, bones dissolved, only thin skins remained, before even those turned to ash in the wind. The devil god fled in terror, tearing open space to escape. But it was too late. A beam of fire pierced through dimensions, and she fell, dead, reduced to ash upon touching the ground. Silence returned. Even Dushan Devil King trembled. This place, he whispered, is a death trap. Qin Mu's eyes glowed faintly as realization struck him. This isn't a barrier to keep enemies out. It's a prison meant to keep people from leaving. And it was left behind by the one who destroyed the great ruins. Dushan Devil King froze for a brief moment when he heard Qin Mu's words. His pupils shrank slightly, and then realization struck him like lightning. So that was the truth. This so-called restricted area within the forest, it was never meant to defend against invaders from the outside. It existed to imprison those within. If its purpose had been to repel external enemies, then only those who trespassed inward would trigger its deadly mechanisms. But here, this place was different. Whether one tried to enter or to leave, the outcome was the same. Utter annihilation. Everything that crossed its boundaries would be mercilessly erased. Dushan Devil King's gaze shifted toward the ruins nearby, and his thoughts deepened. Those broken remains, they were not the result of time or natural decay. No, those were traces of resistance. A path carved out by force, by the desperate people of Carefree Village who had once tried to escape this invisible cage. A path born from struggle, not from nature. To infer so much from such faint clues, Dushan Devil King felt a chill crawl up his spine. An ordinary person would never notice this. The ones who taught this brat, they must all be terrifying. Cunning monsters. His body shuddered involuntarily. He now understood clearly. Those heavenly devils clinging to the ship earlier had not escaped Qin Mu's notice at all. Qin Mu had simply chosen not to expose them, using them instead as expendable tools to test the path ahead. Such calm cruelty, such calculated ruthlessness. This youth, he was far more dangerous than he appeared. Suppressing the unease in his heart, Dushan Devil King turned his attention back to the restricted area. With the moonship alone, entering this place is impossible. He thought grimly. It's far too large. The moment it crosses the boundary, it will trigger the restrictions. If even that female devil god was wiped out so easily, destroying this ship would be nothing. Just as that thought formed, the moonship trembled violently. A deep rumble echoed as the enormous three-legged vessel slowly sank downward. As if kneeling, its massive body settled onto the ground with a heavy thud and became completely still. Dushan Devil King immediately sensed something else. The overwhelming divine aura surrounding Qin Mu vanished. He let out a long breath he didn't realize he had been holding. If Qin Mu had recklessly driven the ship into the restricted area, even he, the great Devil King, would not have survived. What astonished him even more was this: despite witnessing the destruction of his home, Qin Mu had not lost his reason. That level of composure was terrifying. Without another word, Dushan Devil King kicked the dragon Qilin awake. The beast stirred, shaking its head groggily before trailing behind him. Its voice was thick with sleep as it mumbled, "Iron lump, where are we?" Dushan Devil King's temper flared instantly. "You slept the entire way and still dared to ask me?" The dragon Qilin grinned lazily. "So you don't know either? Looks like you slept just as well." At the center of the towering pillars, Qin Mu's colossal form began to shrink. Returning to normal, he slowly pulled his legs free from the ship's structure. Earlier, his body had fused with the moonship due to its immense power. Now that he had shrunk, massive footprints were left behind, allowing him to detach himself. But the moment he stood upright, his mind trembled violently. Weakness flooded his entire being. The divine treasures that had been forcefully opened by the ship's boundless energy began to close one after another. Only the spirit embryo and 5 elements divine treasures remained active. The price of controlling such power was his own life force. Yan Jingjing has lived on the sun ship all this time, Qin Mu thought, his chest tightening. She must have paid an even greater price than me. Taking a deep breath, he swallowed several spirit pills to stabilize himself before rising. Devil King, fatty dragon, we're going in. Dushan Devil King narrowed his eyes. You want to use my knowledge to navigate the dangers, and find the truth about your village? Qin Mu nodded calmly. You are the ruler of Dushan world. Your experience far surpasses mine. Only you can lead us safely. The Devil King burst into loud laughter, pride swelling within him. Of course, without me, you'd all be dead. He suddenly paused when he noticed Qin Mu's expression shift slightly. Ahem, just joking. He corrected himself quickly. I'll take you in and out safely. But once we're done, you release me. That was the deal. Qin Mu smiled faintly. Naturally. I can even swear it under the Pact of Earth Count. Dushan Devil King snorted. No need. If we sign that, I'll trust you even less. You'd definitely twist it into a trap. Qin Mu laughed inwardly. He really does understand me well. With that, he leapt onto the dragon Qilin's back. Dushan Devil King followed closely behind. Flames gathered beneath the Qilin's feet, forming clouds of fire as they descended gently to the ground. Soon, they stood at the edge of the restricted area. Dushan Devil King grew visibly tense. He spat out several gears from his mouth, letting them float in the air. There is a safe path, he said lowly, but it was made from inside. Walking out is easy, walking in is not. One wrong step, and we all die. Qin Mu stepped forward without hesitation, opening the chest of the god statue and adjusting the gears within. After inserting a few extra components, he said calmly, "Don't try anything clever. You'll die with us. Relax." The Devil King muttered, "Just follow closely." They moved forward. All 4 of Dushan Devil King's faces scanned the surroundings, his 12 eyes flickering with calculation. His mouths muttered continuously as he deciphered the invisible dangers. Streams of devil chi flowed from his body, forming complex patterns in the air. Numbers and runes intertwined, countless calculations unfolding in real time. Qin Mu watched in amazement. Your attainments in algebra are extraordinary. Of course, the Devil King replied irritably. Without it, you'd only understand the surface of divine arts, not their essence. Qin Mu's eyes lit up. Then teach me. Thus, even as they walked the path between life and death, a conversation about mathematics began. At the very edge of the forest, the atmosphere suddenly grew heavy. Blind's expression turned grave as he leaned on his cane, pausing to catch his breath. Beside him, Butcher stood firm, blades flashing in his hands as he faced the ever-shifting danger ahead. The space surrounding them was no longer stable, it was layered, distorted, and constantly transforming in strange, unpredictable ways. One moment, they stood within a vast, ancient forest stretching endlessly in all directions. The next, the scenery twisted into a scorching desert, heat waves rippling through the air. Then, without warning, it became a raging ocean, waves towering up toward the heavens. And in the blink of an eye, it shifted again, into a cold, boundless cosmos, where stars streaked toward them like deadly projectiles. Each transformation was not merely an illusion, it carried with it a different divine restriction. A deadly law embedded within the space itself. Every time the environment changed, a new restriction activated, unleashing terrifying power. And each time that happened, Butcher had to step forward and meet it head-on. "Blind, Granny, my waist is about to snap," Butcher roared, his voice filled with frustration as he swung his blades to fend off another surge of power. "Are you two done resting yet?" Blind let out a slow sigh. Unmoved. "I'm old. My bones aren't what they used to be. Let me rest a little longer." Butcher's face twisted with anger. "I'm not much younger than you. And my lower half was just reattached, not exactly in perfect condition. If I keep fighting like this, my body's going to split apart right in front of you." Blind replied calmly. "Granny is still young. Let her take over." At that moment, a strange, aged voice emerged from Granny Sis' mouth, dripping with mockery. "Even though I'm quite powerful, this body of my wife can no longer endure much. Wife, why not let me take control?" Scram! Granny C snapped furiously, her own voice cutting through. Butcher and Blind exchanged uneasy glances. The situation was becoming increasingly troubling. Granny Sis' condition, her inner illness, was clearly worsening. Ever since she had reunited with them and faced repeated dangers, Li Tianxing had begun surfacing more frequently, seizing control of her body. The unspoken thought weighed heavily on them all. The devil seed is growing stronger, sooner or later. Old Woman C may be completely replaced by Li Tianxing. Meanwhile, the space around them continued its chaotic shifts. It was as if they had been trapped inside a divine dice. Each face of this dice represented a different divine restriction. Wherever the dice landed, that particular restriction would activate. But this was no ordinary six-sided dice, it had 108 sides. At that moment, the dice had landed on the stars. Instantly, the ground beneath their feet vanished. The world around them transformed into an endless starry void. There was no sky above, no land below, only infinite darkness and countless flickering stars. But those stars were not real. They were mirrors. Suddenly, beams of light converged from all directions, gathering into a single terrifying radiance that shot straight toward them with a deafening hum. "Come!" Butcher bellowed, with a powerful roar. He unleashed his blade technique, every cloud has a silver lining, and struck the incoming divine light. The attack split the beam in half, the severed rays brushing past them and obliterating everything beyond their position. Deaf, get over here," Granny C shouted urgently, far away in the starry expanse. Def was painting with his brush, using his art to contend against the stars themselves. Blind shook his head. "He can't hear you." Before he could finish, Def attempted to fly toward them, but in an instant, a beam of starlight struck him directly, blasting him away and sending him vanishing into the void. "Your turn. I need a break," a voice suddenly spoke, from Granny Sis' mouth. It was Li Tianxing. Without hesitation, Butcher retreated. Granny C stepped forward, her body now driven by the great educational heavenly devil scriptures as she carefully observed the shifting space. They were not the only ones trapped. Deaf, Old Ma, and Cripple were also inside this terrifying formation, but scattered across different faces of the dice, making it nearly impossible to reunite. Granny C had originally come to rescue Blind and the others, but instead, she too had been pulled in. Later, Def arrived and attempted to break the restriction, only to suffer the same fate. Blind slowly stood up, his divine perception piercing through the illusions like a mirror reflecting truth. "This space contains 108 divine restrictions," he said quietly, "but the core mechanism controlling it is not within these 108 layers." His gaze sharpened. "We are inside a god's dice. Old Ma and Cripple are on other sides. Sometimes, they land on the same face as us. Def appears occasionally as well. He paused, calculating rapidly in his mind. Which means this formation has been running for far too long. Its calculations are beginning to deviate. Suddenly, his eyes widened. The god who created this only calculated to the xianxia decimal fraction. He didn't go down to the smallest possible precision. A realization struck him like lightning. This formation will collapse on its own after enough time. At that moment, the space shifted again, this time into a volcanic world. Flames roared like dragons, thunder and lightning crashing violently. Li Tianxing spoke through Granny Sis' lips. How long? Blind paused, then answered. 24,000 years. Shut up, Blind, Butcher roared, nearly losing control. Just then, a voice echoed from outside the formation. Brat, your elders are trapped inside. 6 of them. Everyone froze. They turned toward the void beyond the layered space, but saw nothing. Blind's expression changed drastically as he shouted. More, don't come in. You can't withstand these divine restrictions. From outside, Qin Emu's voice responded calmly. Devil King, do you have a way to save them? Another voice followed, steady, confident, and insightful. This formation uses a secret technique of space matrix, layering 109 spaces into 108 visible sections. He continued, it appears to have 108 layers, but in truth, there are 109. The creator cut corners in calculation, leaving flaws. A brief pause. If we find the hidden 109 space, we can break it. Inside the formation, Granny C and the others exchanged stunned looks. This person saw through everything at a glance. After a moment, the voice spoke again. Do you have a sturdy treasure? Something solid enough to throw into that hidden space. It will act like a foreign object in machinery, jamming the system and collapsing the formation. Qin Mu replied, I picked something up in Roland's Golden Palace. Will this work? Oh, the voice said, slightly surprised. That's quite a treasure. Your luck is truly heaven-defying. Moments later, a glowing pearl appeared within the starry void. It grew larger and larger, until it resembled an entire world, mountains, rivers, waterfalls all contained within its surface. The pearl streaked across the sky, expanding into a massive celestial body, before suddenly vanishing. Be careful, the voice warned. When it breaks, it won't be gentle. The next instant, the entire space exploded into chaos. Layers of space collapsed one after another. Earth, water, fire, and wind surged wildly, tearing through everything. The divine restrictions shattered, releasing violent, uncontrollable energy in all directions. Everyone immediately unleashed their strongest defenses, barely holding on. Fortunately, the energy wasn't targeting them directly. Otherwise, they would have been annihilated instantly. Outside, Qin Mu stood before a forest that had just been reduced to ashes by the shockwave. Then, boom, 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 figures began falling from the sky, crashing into the ground and leaving deep craters behind. Qin Mu shook his head helplessly. So old, and still causing trouble. One by one, the elders regrouped, battered, injured, but alive. They had escaped, and standing before them was Qin Mu. Alongside him stood an imposing iron figure, the Dushan Devil King, with 8 arms resting proudly on his waist, clearly expecting admiration. Behind them lounged a lazy, overweight dragon Qilin, barely awake. More, why are you here? Granny C rushed forward, worried, before she could get too close. Blind quickly warned, stay back, her devil seed is unstable. Li Tianxing might take over at any moment. An old voice laughed from her mouth. Relax, he is the current cult master. I wouldn't harm him. Then, her own voice returned sharply. Li Tianxing, get back. As the tension eased, Qin Mu looked around. Where's village chief? Apothecary? Mute? Blind shook his head. I saw traces of village chief and apothecary, but not Mute. Silence fell. Granny C sighed. If he's alone, it won't be easy for him. Qin Mu's expression darkened. Then he snapped, clearly angry. All of you ran off and didn't come home for New Year. If you got lost, what else could I do but come find you? He pointed forward. Devil King, lead the way. And you all, stop wandering off. The group of elders immediately nodded obediently.